Hello and a warm welcome to Researcher's Desk. Today I've got the great pleasure of welcoming a good friend of mine, Jennifer Hinton. Jennifer is an ecological economist and she's going to be speaking to us about her new book, Game Changer, where she's going to be talking about an economy beyond profit. And it's going to be, I've heard Jennifer talk before. I know she's a brilliant speaker, and Jennifer's bringing to us tangible solutions that are actually really sound like they'll work. So do listen carefully. This is going to be a spectacular talk. Jennifer, the floor is yours. I'm going to turn my own camera off, so it's a nice video. And I will be in the background. I will suddenly appear if there's any technical issues. A warm welcome to Researcher's Desk.
Thank you so much, Alasdair, and thank you everybody for coming during your, I guess, lunch break to spend this with me, with all of us while I present my new book to you all, which, like Alasdair said, it's forthcoming, so I'm hoping it will be published in June. We're going through sort of last stage revisions with the publisher right now, so hopefully that will be ready in June, if not sometime this summer. And, without further ado, I will share my slides because actually, so I will take about 30 minutes to present it. Oh, there's the title. Um, so this is an hour long or so, right? So I'll take about 30 minutes to present it. Sorry, I tried to make it a bit shorter, but it is an alternative economic system, so it takes some time to present. And then we'll have 30 or so minutes. I'm happy to stay a few minutes over if anybody else wants to, and we can go through some more questions and answers. Um,
So
okay, so
take your time, Jen, and don't feel stressed.
okay, thanks, Alistair. Thank you. So the name, tentative title, this is still subject to change, is Game Changer, an Economy Beyond Profit. And the book consists of three main parts. So the first part is going through our for-profit economy, the type of economic system we have today, and why it's so unsustainable. I've called that playing with fire. Part two, there's a new game in town, and this is where I present the not-for-profit economy model, which I've developed over the last 15 or so years. So this is the latest iteration, and I'm really hoping that the book gets it out to spread these ideas as far and wide as possible. And then part three of the book is changing the game and some ideas I have, we need to democratically deliberate about how we're going to change the economy, but here are some ideas I present about how we can get from here to there. In today's presentation, I'm not going to cover part three. I'm going to focus mostly on part two to give you this new economic vision, but we can talk about change strategies as well after I'm done. So as you'll notice, I keep mentioning the word game. And that's because in the book, I used the concept of a game, something we're all quite familiar with, as a metaphor to think about economic systems, which can otherwise feel really abstract or quite technical. A lot of the time people say, "Oh, but I'm not an economist. I can't talk about these things." So I find the game metaphor quite useful because let's imagine you have a new game that you're taking out. You put the box on the table, you open the box, and then you start setting it up, right? So it's very similar to the way we set up an economic system. It's a useful way for thinking about the structure of the economic system. Um, so you've got your game on the table. You take out the board. You hand out the different playing pieces, maybe some cards, maybe there's dice, right? And critically, every game comes with an instruction manual that tells you what the objective of the game is. How do you win? What is winning in this game? What are the main rules? And then that sort of setup of the game guides players' strategies. How are they going to play to win the game? And then over time, as the game plays out, we'll end up seeing certain dynamics based on the way the structures guide people, the game setup, the rules and the objective guide people to play the game. And some some players at the table might end up taking up more space on the board. They might end up, with all of the blue properties in Monopoly or with most of the cards in the game. And that signals that, oh, I'm using effective strategies, I'm going to win the game. But other players might notice, okay, my strategies aren't working. Maybe I need to change strategy. So there's a bit of a feedback there where the dynamics of the game um, shape and inform people's strategies as they play it. And this is similar to the economy as we'll go through in just a minute. Um, so let's look at how this works in our current economic system, which I call the for-profit economy. Well, first, if we open up our economic system and see how it works, start setting it up, we'll notice that the objective of the game is to get rich. So success, prosperity, and progress in this economic system are defined in terms of money. A prosperous country has a large GDP or BNP. A successful company has a lot of profit, right? And a successful person or household has a lot of money. They're wealthy. So that's the objective of the game. And the story that sort of legitimizes or explains why that is that human nature is mostly greedy and competitive. And so financial gain is the best way to motivate investment, innovation, and efficiency. And so profit-driven investment benefits everyone because businesses and entrepreneurs will be motivated to provide the goods that we need, which gives us jobs and incomes that we need to buy the goods. They'll be motivated to innovate solutions to our problems and become more efficient. So that's a story that I think most of us are pretty familiar with. It's sort of the foundational story that justifies the setup of our economic game. And a key building block of this game, of our system today, is for-profit business, which is why I call it the for-profit economy. So most of the businesses that provide goods and services in our economy are for-profit. That's just a legal structure. So if you go to start a business today, you'll go to the government to register a company, and the most sort of commonly available types of businesses are for profit. That's the legal structure offered by the government. It's not the only one, as we'll get into. But the purpose, the legal purpose embedded in for-profit business is financial gain. It exists to enrich business owners and investors. And so the ownership is also structured in a way that allows private investors to receive the profit and assets of the company. And when I talk about profit here, I'm referring to the extra money, the surplus that a business ends up with after it's covered all of its expenses, like paying wages and rent and all of that. And so, in this economic system, most of our goods and services are provided by for-profit companies in the profit-driven market. And in the book, I conceptualize this as sort of four different spheres that the for-profit economy is made of. We've got the profit-driven market, which is the predominant sphere. That's where we're supposed to get most of our goods and services. It's where most of us work. So we're buying goods and services with the wages we get from the profit-driven market. Then there's also, importantly, a regulating state, which is meant to sort of guide and constrain the market to make sure it's sort of behaving the way that we want it to. But again, it's profit driven. Then we have civil society, which is like a charitable sector where people who are in need, can get the things they need for free, and it's subsidized by the state or by philanthropy from the market. And then there's what I call the informal care sector. Sometimes this is also just called households. But that's where unpaid care happens, where we're cooking meals for our families or cleaning the house for free. But sort of ideally, a lot of that work should be happening in the profit-driven market because then you get more money and innovation happening and efficiency according to the story. So informal care is sort of minimized in the system. And so, a key thing, if we go back to that first diagram I showed, is that effective strategies drive system-wide dynamics, which then push more and more players to use the same kinds of strategies. So, we start to see in any economic system um, that players will start to use the most effective strategies, and those will become commonplace or widespread. So, if we are in our current economic system, the for-profit economy, businesses are competing in the profit-driven market to produce financial gain for their private owners, right? And so one key strategy that's been very effective, and so we see it spread throughout the global economy, is using manipulative advertising, which then it basically appeals to our sense of insecurity. Ads that tell us that we're not beautiful enough, not happy enough, not smart enough, whatever it is. And so if we buy their goods and services, then we'll become smarter, happier, more beautiful, all of that. And this is a very effective profit-seeking strategy. So it does produce more sales, which produce more profit, which can then be reinvested in more manipulative advertising. And of course, the point of all that is that it provides money for the owners. The owners of these businesses can receive the profit. And that's why we see ads all around us, right? It's just a widespread, very effective strategy for financial gain. Another important strategy we see is planned obsolescence, when companies design products and services to become obsolete before they need to, um, so that they can sell more stuff sooner rather than later. So if you think about your clothes, mobile phones, laptops, these are all routinely designed by companies to become obsolete or break down so that we have to replace them sooner rather than later. And like I said before, it's a very effective strategy. It does result in more sales and more profit for owners. But of course, that comes at the expense of unnecessary household expenses for all of us. And then, of course, all of this production and sales and consumption have horrible effects on the environment. So we've got all of it driving environmental destruction, but at the same time, money for owners, which is the purpose. So just to, here's some examples of planned obsolescence. We've got fashion up there in the left-hand corner and electronics down in the right-hand corner. And another important strategy is to cut costs, right? So you can increase sales with planned obsolescence and ads, but it's also really important to decrease costs. And wages are a key cost of doing business. So the higher the wages, the less profit there will be, the less surplus. And the lower the wages, the more surplus. So there's an inherent incentive to keep wages as low as possible when investment is made for profit. And it is very effective at producing profit, again, for owners who are then able to invest more in this for-profit economy. Um, but all of that wage suppression and accumulation of wealth by a handful of business owners is what's driving the incredible levels of inequality we see. And of course, there's a bit of a lock-in here as well, where if wages are low, then we can't afford to buy higher priced things. So there's more demand for low prices. Prices have to stay low. And in order for prices to stay low, we need to underpay workers. So there's also that sort of lock-in, lots of reinforcing feedback loops or vicious cycles in this system. And we can see this playing out in all of these different statistics that we hear. For instance, the top 10 billionaires in the world have more wealth than the poorest 85 countries combined, which is obscene. Those are billions of people have less wealth than 10 billionaires. And that's an old statistic even. Um, so another, then like the last, and I go into a lot more strategy and a lot more of these dynamics in detail in the book, but I didn't want to spend too much time on this today. Um, but another important type of strategy, in addition to increasing sales and cutting costs, is to control and influence the market as much as possible for profit. So companies and owners that have accumulated wealth and profit can use that to influence policy through lobbying against policies that would protect workers and the environment, or lobbying for policies that would cost them money, sorry, lobbying for policies that would give them subsidies and such. So we can influence policy, they can influence policy to allow for wage suppression, resulting in more money for them, or to allow for ads and planned obsolescence, or to allow for environmentally harmful techniques and products, or to allow for tax havens and tax loops, right? And all of that stuff is done because it's so profitable, and that's the point of the system. So the dynamics of the for-profit economy that we can expect based on the way we've structured this system, is consumerism, environmental crises, inequality, and political capture, just to name a few. The list could go on. Um, and so our economy is driving social and ecological crises because it's organized to achieve the goal of making money for investors. It's not organized to protect us or meet our needs or solve environmental crises. And it's achieving what it's set up to do very well. It is making a handful of owners and investors extremely rich, as you can see with Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and the rest of them. Um, okay, but then what's the alternative? Well, if we go back to thinking about the game, if players find that the dynamics are too unhealthy, if we find that this economy is destroying life on Earth as it is, we have the agency to come together and change the game itself, to change the setup of the game and the objective. And there is a good place for my model. So my proposal is the not-for-profit economy model. Um, and so the basic building block of this different kind of economy is not-for-profit business. And the reason that I'm inspired by this vision, and I've been inspired to write this book and work on this for so long, is because it already exists. It's a fairly straightforward and easy stepping stone. We can find not-for-profit businesses around the world and in all major sectors of the economy. So what is a not-for-profit business? It is also a legal structure that you can go and start a business up today as a not-for-profit. But the purpose is completely different, and that's just key, is that the purpose is for social benefit, societal benefit, and it can't be operated for financial gain. And so then when it comes to ownership, which again is like the ownership of the means of production of our entire economy, there are no private financial owners. There are managers, there are people who must make decisions about what and how the business will operate, but they don't receive the profit. But like any business, they sell goods and services, they provide the things we need, but all surplus, all of the profit has to be reinvested. There's no private distribution of profit and assets to that handful of investors and owners. That just doesn't exist in this building block, in this business model, but more broadly in this entire economic model. So just to make this more concrete for you, and if you've seen my presentations before, you've probably seen some of these examples. I just like to give these examples because they give their sort of tour de force of a lot of diverse different kinds of not-for-profit companies operating around the world in different sectors. So here's BRAC. This is a company in Bangladesh, and their social benefit mission is to make healthcare and education more accessible to rural Bangladeshis. And instead of relying on charity and grants and philanthropy to do that, they operate businesses. So they operate quite a few different kinds of businesses, actually. They operate banking services that give microloans to farmers. They produce and sell different agricultural products to help farmers. They have retail shops where you can buy handicrafts made by rural Bangladeshis who are benefiting from their services. So it's been such a successful model that it's now expanded beyond Bangladesh into several different countries, and those are all sort of operated by local headquarters informed by local needs. Again, all of the profit made from those businesses goes back into that societal benefit mission of making healthcare and education accessible. Here's a real estate company in Australia, homegrown real estate. So they own they sell and manage different properties, commercial properties or homes. Um, and all of the profit that they make from doing these real estate activities goes to helping people who are facing housing insecurity. Like this woman, Rachel, you can see here, she says, homegrown real estate gave me the ability to move on with my life after being homeless for over a year and a half. So that's the power of profit when it is reinvested for social benefit instead of extracted for private financial gain. Excuse me. You can find renewable energy companies. This is a renewable energy cooperative in Spain. Same thing. They provide the service of renewable energy. All of their profit goes back into making that more accessible. Not-for-profit cybersecurity company. So again, just giving you a taste of the diversity that's out there. I've found tons of not-for-profit bakeries, restaurants, cafes, um, farms even. So there's a lot of really great stuff happening in these not-for-profit businesses. And again, they're operating as businesses, which means that they can replace for-profit business as the basic building block of our economy. Here's some examples in Sweden, because I guess most of you are in Sweden right now, so won't go into all of those, but there's a lot also here. Um, and so if we go back to thinking not just about individual businesses, but thinking about a more systemic level here, there's a different logic and a different setup at play in this model. So the objective of the game, of the not-for-profit economy model, is that it is to meet needs, meet everyone's needs in harmony with nature, so within ecological limits. And the sort of story or justification for organizing the economy in this way is that we have, as humans, an innate desire to solve problems and care for others. And that can motivate investment and innovation and efficiency. So if you think about the chair you're sitting in right now or the glass you're drinking from, these are all innovations that were invented to meet challenges or solve problems. They weren't invented to try to make money. And if you look at everything humans have invented, that tends to be the case. So needs-based investment can benefit everyone through goods, providing goods that are actually useful, providing meaningful jobs, an adequate income, good innovation, and efficiency. And so then we have four spheres of the economy that look quite similar on the face of things, similar to the for-profit economy. And I think that's useful because it allows us to imagine more easily how we could transition to this system, but they're different in fundamental ways. So instead of a profit-driven market full of for-profit companies, here we have a needs-based market full of not-for-profit companies that are all reinvesting all of the surplus in social benefit. Then we have a partner state instead of a regulating state that has to try to wrestle with and constrain this unruly market. We have a state that actually sees, oh, the market is trying to meet needs within ecological limits, and so am I. So they can actually work together as partners for social benefit, sustainable social benefit. Civil society is still there. You still have a charitable sector that can receive funding from the state or from the market to do good things. Think of like the Red Crescent and the Red Cross in emergencies and stuff. That stuff is still important part of society and the economy. And then lastly, instead of just having informal care that's sort of pushed out and pushed down in the for-profit economy, the not-for-profit economy model allows the commons to really flourish and take up a lot of space in our social life. So think of the way that not only we care for each other within our households, but the way that we can care for each other in neighborhoods and communities through community gardens, helping each other repair things and sharing tools and so on. So that's all, anything that's sort of unpaid care work happens in the commons. And so if we think about, okay, so those are the spheres that's sort of the setup and the structure of the not-for-profit economy model. Now, what can we expect this to look like in action? What would be the dynamics, the strategies, and the dynamics that players experience? So one of the key strategies, and these in the book, I have a chapter just for strategies, and it's based on strategies we see existing not-for-profit businesses using. So it's based on real-world evidence. So because they are set up for societal benefit, they tend to offer very useful goods and services that directly and clearly meet needs. So investment is made into offering useful goods and services that then meet the community's needs, which then, and here we have for the first time a red arrow. And the red arrow means that there's an opposite relationship. So far we've said more investment, more useful goods, more needs being met. But the red arrow, they go in different directions. So the more needs are met, the less investment has to be made. Because if our needs are already met, we don't need more investment and production and consumption, right? So there's a level of enough that can be achieved in the system, a level of sufficiency, which is really important for sustainability, of course. So if everybody's needs are being met more or less, then we have better levels of equality. Um, then, of course, the profit and assets that are the profit that's made from providing, selling all those goods and services can be, not can be, must be reinvested. And so you have this nice cycle. There's no extraction to private owners. There are no private financial owners to extract the profit. So it stays circulating to meet needs. And of course, we haven't changed the laws of physics, so producing and selling goods and services is still going to have environmental impacts. But here we can acknowledge, this system actually acknowledges that those environmental impacts also harm us. We are part of nature. So there's an important feedback there too, that offering useful goods and services, yes, but also within environmental limits, in harmony with nature. So just an example of, a nice healthy farmers market, people selling healthy food and services. That's what a not-for-profit needs-based market could look like, something like that. So to take this a little bit further, uh, we can imagine also that, I'm not advocating for the market to do everything. We still have that partner state there. All of these different spheres can really help each other in achieving that goal of meeting needs. So if equality is not, if we have sort of undesirable levels of inequality in the system, the state, the partner state, can of course come in and put in some redistributional policies. Maybe some taxes are needed, or maybe a universal basic income or something that can then produce more equality. So this is how that needs-based market and partner state can work together. Um, Another important strategy we see not-for-profit businesses and social enterprises using across the board is pricing for affordability. So here I've written decreasing pricing, but it's not always just a straight decrease. Sometimes there's like a sliding scale fee, so you pay more if you can afford to, so that people who can't afford it can pay less. So there's a lot of innovative pricing used by these companies that then increases the affordability of goods, which allows for the needs of the community to be better met. Then, alongside that, because affordability is not only about prices, wages are an important part of that equation. So, investment can also be used not only to make prices more accessible, but to increase wages and make sure everybody is paid a living wage. And so that also increases the affordability of goods and meeting needs. And then, of course, that's coming from the profit that is made by selling the goods and services. So you see how the profit is made, but it's all reinvested in good ways that help meet needs, rather than accumulating in the hands of a few people who don't need it. um, Yay. So just to break up some of these diagrams. Then if we think about more about the environmental concerns. I know with Researchers Desk, like that was one of the key reasons it started was talking about the climate crisis. Um, and so just going into this in a little bit more depth, of course, we still get environmental impacts from production, but like I said before, this economy, this system allows us to acknowledge that we need a healthy environment for us to be healthy as humans. And so that also can guide investment. If environmental problems are if we don't have healthy environments, then that might mean that we need to invest less in production. We need to bring down production and consumption just to the bare minimum to meet needs, and have minimize our environmental impacts. But it can also mean that then we invest some of that money into eco care services and regenerating ecosystems, regenerating forests and wetlands and so on, which can then help bring environmental health back up and make us healthier in the process. So there's really, if when you see these red and blue arrows together, it's a sign that there's balance in the system. This is a system that can and is designed to respond to our changing needs and conditions. Um, and then again, like it's not just the market working here. We can have the state, the partner state has a really important role to play in environmental regulations and like banning unhealthy and dangerous things, putting caps on resource use and all of that, which then can reduce production. But again, in our for-profit economy, if the government tries to do that stuff and it reduces production and profit, the economy goes into crisis because all of the surplus has been accumulating in the hands of a few. So there's not enough resources for us if production slows down. In this system, the system can actually just adapt to that. And because it keeps goods, services, and money circulating, it doesn't crash. It's much more flexible. Um, yes, so here's sort of the vision of having a not-for-profit economy in its proper place and as a small part of society. You know, the economy today has like outgrown society and the biosphere. This is a system that would allow us to have the economy in its place as a small part of social life and society as, just part of the biosphere. Um, Couple of last points and then I'll wrap it up is just that this also allows for a shorter working week, which is, I think, really a beautiful thing. That, we can have sustainable products that really last and can be repaired and all of that. So we don't need to buy so much stuff, which means there's not as much demand for products, production can slow down, work can come down. We can have a much shorter working week because there's not as much need for production or for money for us to buy stuff because we're not having to constantly replace things that are breaking down. Um, so we would have much more time to do the things that really make life good and meaningful and connecting with ourselves, connecting with each other, connecting with nature, growing more of our own food, really having that robust commons, like I said before. Um, yes, and just to show how like this leaves time when we have more equality and a shorter working week and better provisioning systems, it leaves more time for people to have cultural pursuits, whether that's like the arts, or going out in nature or playing sports or whatever it is, which helps meet our needs as well outside of the economy. Um, and yeah, so that all comes together in that way. Investment can go into that as well. And so we could have much more cultural flourishing as well in this type of economy. Um, and like I said, more connection with nature. So the dynamics that we could reasonably expect based on existing structures, the not-for-profit business structure, existing sort of regulations, and the strategies that these types of businesses already use are more economic equality, ecological stewardship, cultural flourishing, and widespread well-being as a result of all of those things. Um, and here, just to show, like, it's not a fits all. You could imagine this kind of system taking shape in a lot of different ways, depending on the context. So there might be some places that would like more of a needs-based market where you do more of the repair work and refurbishing through the market for paid work. Or you could have more of a state with a lot more like social provisioning of goods and services. Or if you look down in the bottom left-hand corner, more commons. So we could have, you could imagine a community economy that's most of the work, most of the goods and services are not paid for. You know, you just build them with your neighbors, like a lot of eco villages do today. And then you could have a more heavy, like civil society model as well. And so, last slide here is just that the not-for-profit economy model is a not-for-profit market economy. And as such, it offers a viable alternative to both this completely unsustainable capitalist economy we have today, as well as the state-planned communist economy that we're told that's the only alternative. This is actually a different way, which I think is super important. And I'll just say thank you there and stop sharing my slides.
That was stunning, Jennifer, and really an amazing talk. Thank you so much. We've all learned not lots. And for the sake of the recording, I just want everyone to be aware that this book will be released and in June, and just follow the Researchers Desk newsletter, and we will definitely be announcing it.